Welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 video. In this one, I wanted to discuss early and mid-game multi-class builds and why there are so few videos on YouTube about this. The quick and easy answer, if you don't want to watch this whole video, is if you do it early, you're going to be much weaker than if you just stay with the class that you're currently in. Let's take a look at each class to better illustrate the point. The ones that are the easiest to demonstrate are the Monk, the Ranger, the Barbarian, the Fighter, and the Paladin. Each of these classes has their damage effectively doubled at level 5, as this is the level that they gain the extra attack passive, which lets them attack a second time in the same turn. We're going to move on to the Warlock, Bard, and the Druid next. And depending on how you intend to play them, they can be melee characters also. Let's take a look at Warlock first. I put Warlock in this section and every section because it's very versatile. At level 3, you can pick a Pact, and if you pick Pact of the Blade, level 5 will get you the extra attack passive with your Pact weapon. Warlock is a special case, and I'm going to discuss Warlock specifically at the end of the video. This is possibly the only class that won't struggle with an early game multi-class. Druid is also mentioned in this section if you are going with a wild shape build, because again at level 5 you will get an extra attack in your wild shape forms. Then finally in this section, if you go martial bard, meaning up close and personal swinging a weapon, you do have to wait an extra level to level 6 for the extra attack passive. And keep in mind that is only the College of Valor and the College of Swords that will get that. If you went College of Lore, you will not get extra attack just leveling up Bard. So it should be obvious that doing anything else before level 5 will be a huge blow to your damage. Being able to attack twice without the use of haste or a speed potion is going to be very hard to justify losing for the sake of multi-classing, and you will miss out on the biggest possible power spike you can have in the early game. Let's move on to the spellcasters now. In this section we have the Cleric, the Druid, the Sorcerer, the Bard, and the Wizard. With the casting classes, level 5 is once again a power spike for you. You'll gain access to level 3 spells and spell slots, so you can cast your level 3 spells. Your cantrips are also going to gain an additional damage dice at this level, meaning if it did a 1d6, it should now do a 2d6. Let's quickly go over each of these classes and what they get at level 5. I'll have each class's level 3 spells on screen, and I will shout out some of the strongest ones, in my opinion, that you should go for. First up here we have the Bard. Some very powerful spells at level 5 for the Bard are going to be Hypnotic Pattern for crowd control. Plant Growth, again, is very strong crowd control, and that's not based on a save. Plant Growth is just going to cover the ground in difficult terrain, making it harder for the enemies to get to you. And then Glyph of Warding. That can be crowd control with sleep or the pushing, or it can just be a big AoE, and you can cast it on enemies. You don't have to wait for them to trigger it. So it's a really good spell that I don't feel a lot of people use as much as they should. It's worth noting that Bards get a second power spike at level 6 if you've gone College of Lore. You'll gain access to 2 level 3 spell slots from the other classes, and I will have this popped up on screen here. Some things of note: you could take Eldritch Blast from the Warlock tree, you could take Fireball, you could take, anything really that speaks to you, but Fireball is fantastic as far as one of the best early damage spells. Alright, next is going to be Cleric. At level 5, they're going to gain access to everything listed here, but some of the strongest spells, in my opinion again, are going to be Spirit Guardians. That's good for offensive purposes as well as defense. You can pick either Radiant or Necrotic damage for this skill. It's going to put these little orbitals around your character, and then anything that comes in contact with them is going to take either radiant or necrotic damage, depending on what you picked. Clerics also gain access to Glyph of Warding, which I talked about in the Bard section. Just a very strong spell, very slept on, very good. Animate Dead is another option that you can pick as well if you want to go Necromancer, or you just want to have some extra bodies to take some hits for you. Also available at level 3. And then just briefly looking at some of the subclasses of Cleric and some spell highlights there, we're going to look at Light Domain. They're going to pick up Fireball. Nature gets Plant Growth, which again I talked about in the Bard section, and then Tempest gets Call Lightning. Moving on next to the Druid. Once again, I'm going to shout out Plant Growth, fantastic crowd control, and Call Lightning is a strong damage dealing spell. Then depending on your subclass, if you went Circle of the Land Druid, you can get Haste, which is possibly the strongest spell in the game if you go for the Arctic or Grassland terrain. Haste is arguably the strongest spell in this game because more actions per turn means more things dead before they get to go. On to Sorcerer. Some highlights in this list are once again Haste and Hypnotic Pattern. Haste being just incredibly strong and Hypnotic Pattern being some really good crowd control. Also, you can get Fireball, which I talked about earlier. Incredibly good damage dealing spell, and it's an area of effect spell as well, which is nice. Also, not to sleep on Counterspell. Really good. You can effectively just cancel a spell that an enemy is doing. It'll burn a spell slot and your reaction, but it's worth it. If you see some big nuke coming your way, you can just counter it. Can fail, but it's still incredibly strong. Next, I'm going to talk about the Wizard. The Wizard gains access to quite a few powerful spells at level 5. Some notable ones is going to be Fireball, Counterspell, Glyph of Warding, Haste, and Hypnotic Pattern. Wizard is different though, because if you can find the spell that you want in scroll form, they're able to learn it for just a little bit of gold, 50 to like 300 depending on what spell it is. Once you learn it that way, it's in their spellbook forever. Even if you change classes entirely and decide to go fighter and then later go back to wizard, they'll still have the spells that you paid for in that spellbook. All that said, you do need to have the right level of spell slot to be able to cast those learned spells, so if you don't, then you can't use them until you correct that. Then finally in the casting section, we have the Warlock. Warlocks are the only class in the game that can get Hunger of Hadar at level 5, which is a fantastic crowd control spell because it makes difficult terrain. It also blinds the enemies, and it also does damage at the beginning and ending of the enemy turns. The Bard can get this spell. It's the only other class that can, as far as I know. If you go College of Lore, you can pick it up as early as level 6 by getting it as one of your 2 bonus spells. And if you go any other kind of Bard, you could pick it up at level 10 because you'll get another choice of 2 spells at level 10. Some other noteworthy spells, again, Counterspell and Hypnotic Pattern are fantastic pickups at level 5. I said in the early part of this video that Warlock is the exception to the video, and that reason is because of Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast levels up based on your character's level, not your character's class level. So once you get to level 5, you get a second beam of Eldritch Blast. This spell works the same way Scorching Ray does, where you can take both beams and target one enemy, or you can target 2 enemies with 1 beam each. So the Warlock, in this sense, doesn't lose the power spike, at least with Eldritch Blast, because it will happen at level 5 no matter what your build is, as long as one of your levels is Warlock. So, for example, a very strong early game build may look like 1 level into Fighter. You're going to start as a Fighter so you can have heavy armor. Then take 3 levels into Warlock. At level 2, you want to pick up Agonizing Blast and maybe Dark Vision. Agonizing Blast is going to make your Eldritch Blast stronger because you're stacking Charisma. Dark Vision is just very strong because you can stand in the darkness and not take the penalties. At level 3, you'll take Pact of the Blade because then you can bind a weapon to your Warlock, and that weapon will use your Charisma modifier instead of Strength for damage. Then at level 5, you would pick up your second level in Fighter for Action Surge, which would allow you a second turn once per short rest. Now you may have noticed that I have not yet talked about the Rogue. I didn't put it in the casting section, and I didn't put it in the Martial class section. That's because personally, I am not a huge fan of this class. That said, it is very strong if played a certain way. Rogue will never gain a second attack through leveling just the Rogue. The damage for rogues comes from your sneak attacks. So if you like the idea of hiding in the shadows and stealthily shooting an arrow at an enemy and then running away back into stealth and rinse and repeat, then the rogue is for you, and it can be very strong. You can complete encounters before they even start just from stealth. For me, I don't love that playstyle, but I'm sure plenty of you out there will enjoy that, so by all means, go rogue. The rogue's power spike is more gradual, and I would never really say that they spike. As you level your rogue, you're going to gain additional damage on your sneak attack. When it starts out level 1 and 2, you do 1d6 additional damage if you do a sneak attack. Every 2 levels after that, you do an additional d6. So levels 3 and 4, you're going to do 2d6 on a sneak attack. This will cap at 5d6 at level 9. Level 9 through 12, you do not gain any more dice on your sneak attack damage. I personally like to mix some rogue in to other multi-class builds. Level 3 rogue, people are probably tired of seeing, but level 3 rogue taking the thief subclass is so strong for the extra bonus action. With all that said, I hope it's a bit more obvious why there aren't that many early game multi-class build videos. Multiclassing really only starts to be viable at level 7 or 8. Don't let me stop you though. If your heart is set on multiclassing earlier, then by all means, go for it. This is your story. You write it how you want it to be written. If you do realize later down the line that your build choices was a mistake, it only costs 100 gold to respec at Withers, so feel free to experiment. Let me know in the comments if this was helpful. I'd love to see some discussion on early game builds, as nearly all the content on YouTube is endgame level 12 builds. I have some mid-game build videos that I'd like to put together. I just have to find the time. I think they would be helpful to newer players though. If you've made it this far in the video, please consider liking, subscribing to the channel. It's super helpful. Thank you so much for your time. I'll see you in the next video.